Started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Wolf. I'm the programming coordinator for the Osterville Village Library.
So people online can see you.
I am also very shy, so I will start over. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Wolf. I'm the programming coordinator for the Osterville Village Library. Thank you so much for being with us today. And to our friends joining us on Zoom, thank you so much for being here as well. Today, we have the pleasure of having Colin Reed from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution discussing Our Living Ocean. Colin Reed serves as the Director of Community Relations and Engagement at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Formerly the Senior Advisor to the President and Director, focusing on management and strategy for the institution, Colin now works at amplifying WHOI's mission by bringing WHOI's message to audiences all over the Cape and New England, while WHOI's researchers stay focused on exploration and pursuing scientific discovery. Originally from Vermont, Colin returned to his New England roots at WHOI in 2015 after working for the Consortium for Ocean Leadership in Washington, D.C. for 12 years. So without further ado, Colin Reed.
Don't know why it's the image for our in-house folks going in and out. We'll do the best with what we got. So thank you very much for having me. Thanks. This is my second time here. I recognize some folks from the first time. So thankfully, I've changed it up a little bit. It's not just a WHOI 101 basic. We're going to go a little bit further. Let me start my timer here to keep me truthful and on time. So our ocean, our planet, our future. Let me minimize this here. That's what we're talking about today. Why the ocean, why our planet, why our future, why the research we're doing is why we're doing it, and what you can do. My objective overall for coming and engaging with all different folks now is to introduce and engage the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution locally and regionally. You'll see that there's some re's before the introduce and the engage. So reintroduce and re-engage, because we have done quite a bit over the 93 years we've been in existence, but we went quiet for a little bit and sometimes people forget what we do. So I want to re-engage with folks, right? Today I want to cover the why, the big whys. I also want to give you a little bit of structure into why the ocean, why it's extremely important for us. I want to give you a little bit of the history of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and a little bit into some of the research projects that we're doing. So I have some videos laced in here. And then I do want to share with you a invitation to join us. So the big question, why? Well, I think it's pretty apparent that life on Earth depends on the ocean and our projector to work. I don't know what's happening here. Sorry for the in-house folks that don't know how to fix that. Life on Earth depends on the ocean, right? It's extremely important. The more people understand about the ocean, and there's more awareness, and we want more awareness and we want more public support, and that's extremely important, right? So why the ocean? Well, overall, the health of the, my good friend ChatGPT. We're going to do a little bit hybrid here. I'll speak to everything and we'll do a dog and pony, and you'll see these occasionally. The health of the oceans directly impact the health of the planet and all living organisms. Protecting marine ecosystems is essential for sustaining all life on Earth. And, the 6 things that ChatGPT, which we already knew, but I wanted to show the new AI stuff, oxygen production, right? Most of our oxygen that we get, that we breathe daily, comes from the ocean in one way or another. We have these bumper stickers that say, "Take a breath, thank the ocean." It's kind of fun. You'll see them around when you look at people's bumper stickers. Climate regulation. There is a big relationship between oxygen and carbon dioxide, and what you'll hear in the future is carbon pumps. That's huge. Biodiversity, supplying There's just so much in the ocean that we know about. There's populations in the ocean that we don't know about, but we're going out to discover. And then there's this big piece of the pie of the unknowable that we just don't know yet. And we're looking at trying to figure that out. Nutrient cycling, water cycle, food source, all of this is important. Something new is really trying to put ourselves, into the ocean. Really, how big is the ocean? Had some fun with Google AI. We know that the Earth's surface is covered 71% by water, and it contains, 96.5 of all of our planet's water. Some of my bosses and predecessors joke it shouldn't be called Earth, it should be called ocean, because of all the water that we have here. So just thinking about the size and magnitude of the ocean, how many gallons of water in the world's ocean? According to Google AI, 352 quintillion gallons. With a lot of zeros, there you go. Now let's put some perspective into that. The average gallon of water weighs 8.34 pounds. So 8.34 times 352 is quite a bit. Now, average American male weighs 199.8 pounds or 23.96 gallons of water. So if you take that overall big number and you do column math, that comes out to quite a large number to show the magnitude of how many American males would be needed to fill the ocean of water, a human body's worth of water. It's a lot. Ocean is big. I think we get that. So let's move on to the science. Science is important. It's why you're here, I hope. I want to make the ploy that not only just all science, but earth science is extremely important. Earth science is composed of astronomy, geology, meteorology, oceanography. Today, we're going to talk specifically about oceanography, but, we look at celestial events recently. I don't know if any of you were lucky enough to get the phone call or be outside at that specific moment. This is taken from Chappie Beach. My wife called and was like, get outside now. And I was lucky enough to get down the road and see it. This is without the filters, but you can see. But again, it's merging everything here when you have a celestial event. And it takes science to understand how and why those things. We've had a lot of hurricanes recently. That's the merging of oceanography, meteorology, and everything. So another point I want to make is science overall, the importance, and when you're reading reports in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the USA Today, whatever your source is, I want you to think about this view here. At the top, you have different stakeholders: academia, traditional media, social media, the first responders in some cases, industry, elected officials. When you see science being featured somewhere, it is being politicized in ways that we haven't seen in the past. But this comes from a book that I have showcased here, Science and the Crisis of Communication. One of our main researchers, Chris Reddy, was at the forefront of the Deepwater Horizon spill. He was one of the main scientists speaking up and about the oil spill. Our folks were using their own credit cards to get down. When I say our folks, the ocean research academic industry went down. There was no funding because nobody knew it was going to happen, right? And everybody just went down to get as much data as it was happening. So to get data before, during, and after. Now, there is a lot of data that existed beforehand, but people needed to get down there very quickly. So in doing so, Chris was one of the main ones that being called to the table, the congressional table, if you will, about why this happened, what are the implications, what's going on, and they needed definitive answers. Chris, extremely stressful situation, involved tons of lawyers. And what really comes out of it, one of his salient points here, is the timescales that people need all are different. These things the cell phone, for those of you that can't see online, cell phones have changed the immediacy of data. We can go in and look and find out how many people were at Fenway Park in 1932 on May 5th against the Yankees, if that's who they happen to be playing, whoever they were playing. You can get that in nanoseconds now. So people want, big scientific questions answered definitively in nanoseconds. We don't operate that way. Academia and science operates in decades. To get a paper published, you have to go through a series of major peer review, we call it. They do that, they publish, or they create a manuscript. The manuscript has to go through many, many different levels before it's published. I'm sure all of you know this, but it's a slow process. So why is this important to understand? Because when you have media coming in, media has seconds and hours to respond to something. They need to say something definitively. Responders in industry, days and weeks. The timeline's just there. Again, it's like a fruit cart, right? You have apples and oranges. It's all in time, but it's just different times. And elected officials, they're years, but a lot of times their timescales are short, kind of like traditional media now, all because of a cell phone, right? So everybody has a different goal. Everybody has a different success rate. Academia, you want to become tenured. Media wants high ratings. Social media, you want exposures. You want people following you. Responders, they want safety. Profit, industry wants profit. Elected officials want re-election, right? So there's a really interesting and fun, and it's probably not going to work online here. So I'll make sure that Amy has the link for it to send you. But go to check out Jaws. Jaws is going to have a huge anniversary this summer. In this scene here, and I'll just describe it, you have a scientist, an elected official, and a public safety responder, right? Let's go back to this. We've got 3 of these people right now. When this was filmed, they had media. There was no social media. There was no immediacy, right? But they had the media there. In this scene, you have a scientist, you have the elected official, you have the sheriff, all talking about this shark, right? The sheriff here wants to shut down the beach. He needs data quickly, and he needs to make a decision for public safety. The mayor here doesn't want to shut down the beach because it's going to affect his reelection, but it's going to affect everybody's happiness. It's July 4th. Why would we ever shut down this revenue machine? Then you have the scientist. Our scientists have been groomed and trained and specialized in what they don't know. Again, it's a long process, right? You have to prove time and time again what you know, but a lot of the times you end up reflecting on what you don't know, and that's actually how they start the answers. In this scene, the mayor said, well, what kind of shark was it? And he lists it off of what he knew. Well, do you have a tooth to prove it? Well, no, I don't. Well, do you know that it was this? And the scientist says, well, no, I don't have this, but I have enough knowledge to. But the minute he put that doubt in there, the elected official didn't listen to him. It's a really interesting thing that I don't think Steven Spielberg really knew what he was doing, in that. I mean, maybe he was, give him a lot of credit, but this scene is exactly what we're talking about here. So when you see articles in these major news machines, just know that sometimes they're asking for immediacy when really there are some things that we can say definitively, and there's a lot that we can't, and that's that kind of relationship. So we have Chris, the plug here. Science communication in a crisis. His whole thing is he does it for 2 different audiences, the general audience for you to learn from, but also for scientists. He does trainings for our scientists to say, don't start with what you don't know, start with what you do know. And that's really what we're trying to change here. Okay. Little bit of a hooey intro. You're going to hear me say hooey for those of you that have been here and seen my talks before. I don't mean hooey that way. I mean hooey, WHOI, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. A lot of people call us the Institute. Drives my branding people crazy, but it's okay. It's institution. We were created in 1930. We were created from a National Academy of Sciences study about needing oceanography. Down in Woods Hole, there's a bastion of science. For those of you that have been down there, you probably know about this, but some of you that don't. It started with NOAA down there studying the cod assessments. That was one of our biggest fisheries at the time. So they needed to understand it. So late 1700s, early 1800s, they started studying these stock assessments to understand what we were doing in the United States, right? Out of which, at the same time, the Marine Biological Laboratory, MBL, was getting its feet wet, per se, doing fundamental biological sampling and studying of ocean animals, of terrestrial animals, but their function was strictly biology, right? It was folks coming down from the University of Chicago in the summertime to come and do research in Woods Hole. Why they would leave Chicago when it finally got sunny and really warm on the Great Lakes, I don't know, but they did this. The MBL is currently owned and operated, if you will, by the University of Chicago system. So those ties have really stayed strong. And then during the World Wars, there was a major effort on behalf of major philanthropic foundations to save the lives of scientists from around the world. They were going to these European countries to basically pluck these scientists to help not only save their lives and the worldly knowledge that they bring, but also to help the American enterprise of science. So you'll see, you know, if anybody who's listened or watched the movie Oppenheimer, you'll see that there were people from around the world studying to help, you know, the scientific enterprise. This is part and parcel of that, right? So Henry Bigelow, who turns out to be our first director of the time, worked with the Rockefeller Foundation to create the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. They created two out of this National Academy of Sciences talk. One they determined was important to be on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. Our West Coast sister, if you will, is the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Hui remains the largest independent oceanographic research firm. What does that mean? That means we do not have to answer to state government funding. We don't have to answer to changes in the federal government funding because we are not line items within each of those. Our scientists each and every day, you know, minute by minute, hour by hour, are writing proposals to those sources to get that funding. So if you think about Hui's research, we are a mall of research. It's inverted. We don't get money at the top and ask people to do research, you know, further down. Scientists decide where the institution's going to go. They're the ones that are applying. They're the ones that are changing the words. So a good example, up until the end of the Cold War, most of the research funding came from the Department of Defense. So our wording was, we're doing this in pursuit of national protection. We're doing this for the safety of the world. But we're doing fundamental oceanography, right? After the Cold War, a lot of that money went to the National Science Foundation and the words changed, but our research remained the same. So we're able to flex as an independent place. And that's the most important part, is we are a nonprofit. We're actually in deficits, but we are nonprofit. There is no profit. It goes into science. My job is being paid for on the shoulders of scientists. That's why I want to tell our story. That's why I want to reintroduce and re-engage the institution more, so that you know the importance, but also I'm hoping to raise your support for oceanography. Think of it this way. Most of our money, 85%-ish, comes from the federal government. Federal government gets its money from Congress. Congress has their annual budget. We haven't passed one as a country in, I think, over a decade. We've been doing continuing resolutions. But those elected officials, and it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, those elected officials make sure that the federal government is funded in some capacity, right? So we, being independent, are able to flex wherever it goes. We don't know what this next election will be, because you don't know until it happens. regarding, which way. Traditionally, we've done very well under Republican administrations because they invest a lot in the Department of Defense. In Democratic, it's a little bit less because it goes to many different funding agencies. So we're able to flex, and that's the most important piece. A lot of words, but when you think about the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, I want you to think of exploration and discovery. That's what we do. Doesn't matter if it's, my wife's a geochemist, so geology and chemistry, right? She studies, and she's gonna kill me for my butchering of what she does. She studies volcanic ash, right? Over, what it's done over millions of years as a way to calculate, the changing climate. Talk about a specialty, right? Right in our own walls of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, this highly specialized type of science. But then we also have fundamental biology. We have marine biology, which everybody, wants to do when you think about going to school. What do you want to do? I want to be a marine biologist. I want to study whales and dolphins, the charismatic things. But we have the chemical, we have the geological, we have the advanced applied. But all of it goes into the guise of exploration and discovery of knowledge about the ocean, because we need to know more about it. We go back to the first few slides. Ocean's immense. We need to learn more. For those of you that come down to Woods Hole, and I know it's not often because the problem with Woods Hole is that it's in Woods Hole and it's a long way to get there. But we do want you to come down and visit. This is a dockside where we first began our operations. We've expanded to a few more districts, if you will. We share not property, but a property border with the WCAI. So anybody that listens to NPR locally and listens to the Moth and other things, it's right next door, and it's been a great relationship. We also have the Steamship Authority right next to us, right? Again, world's independent leader in ocean research, exploration, and education. That is one piece that I neglected to mention before. We have a joint program with MIT about what we do. We put PhDs in to the field at a very high level, and we're looking to expand that. We have unparalleled expertise in ocean science, engineering, and marine operations. Marine operations is an important one to note. Again, I'm terribly sorry for this. I don't know exactly what's happening, but for those of you in the room. But marine operations, we run 2 very large vessels for that are owned and operated or owned by the U.S. Navy, but we have to operate those. But also anything that goes over the side is part of marine operations, right? It is a very interesting task to get the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution insured. There's one place that will do it, and that's Lloyd's of London. And it's very few people within Lloyd's that will take that risk of us insuring some of these robots, one of which you saw on the way in, getting them insured. It's really interesting. And the third one, access this state-of-the-art vehicles, vessels, and facilities. The example that we have in the back is a Remus vehicle. For those of you online, I brought a torpedo-looking robot. The hulls end up being very similar. They can grow in size, but it's the innards that our scientists and engineers change regularly depending on the mission, right? Discovery, ocean discovery and exploration. Some of our biologists can use this to study turtles, for example. So let's try to do a video here, just an introduction of merging all of it together here and talking about it.
Out where the seas are the deepest and the mysteries the greatest lies our future. The ocean is our last unexplored, ungoverned frontier.
All right.
The life support system.
Videos are not going to work on this one. My apologies for the folks online, but I will send you I will send you links so that you can view these. My apologies for the folks in both locations. So finding solutions will take collaboration, creativity, and courage. Again, If you think about the Venn diagram, deep scientific understanding, extraordinary access to the sea, unmatched engineering will allow us to do things, and give you a few examples of what we do. Maybe the Alvin. Alvin turned 60 this year. We've done 60 years successfully. Gonna touch any wood that I can. 60 years of exploration. That's over 4,500 dives, I believe. Don't quote me on that specific one, but that involves 3 people inside this tiny sub, from anywhere from 4 hours to 8 hours, depending on what the mission is. This Alvin was, as many of you know, was used to find the deep sea hydrothermal vents. It was also used by the Navy and various missions to find, as we later found out, it wasn't just about finding the Titanic. There also happened to be a secret mission where they were looking for 2 subs that went down, 2 American subs that had a nuclear reactor on each. So they needed to find that. So Bob Ballard, one of our researchers and engineers, went down to find that. It became declassified in the last few years. There was this big dog and pony show of the Titanic. It was awesome to find it, but that was the cover for them looking for this, for these subs, right? Another fun one, Ocean Worlds. So I spent 12 years down in Washington, D.C., fighting for more oceanographic research monies from the federal government. We're spending billions and billions and billions going to outer space. Why not spend it on the ocean, right? So fast forward, we've been fighting this fight for quite a long time. Hide that. And in doing so, I come here, and within the first 20 days, we received notice that we were getting a research vessel from the Navy, and that we we're going to name it the Neil Armstrong. We have been fighting for so long to differentiate ourselves from space. Now we're going to name it after an astronaut. Why the heck are we doing that? Well, the history of NASA, they named all of their space shuttles after our oceanographic research fleet. The Endeavour. The Atlantis was Huey's original vessel in 1930. We have a shuttle called the Atlantis. You have the Challenger. So when they started naming them after astronauts, it's kind of a reciprocation. Now that's a nice story, right? The newest, the scientific story, is that one of our researchers had been approached by NASA, and it involves many facets of Huey, right? But NASA wants to go out to a moon of Jupiter called Europa. They know that Europa has ice. They know that Europa has hydrothermal activity. They know that typically the combination of the two will yield some kind of biological species or specimen, right? Alien life form, if you will. But NASA doesn't know how to get into ice. They don't necessarily know how to research the hydrothermal vents. So the two of us met together in the middle. Our researcher, Chris German, started working with them. Our engineers and biologists, Tim Shank and Casey Machado, have created a vehicle called Orpheus. Orpheus is, right now, think of Mars rover, where it's taking a mosaic of photos on Mars. This is the underwater style, where it's going to propel itself up and back down, and it's made for mapping, but it can be made for just about anything. Right now, it's the size of the table and about twice the height of the table, and it's a craft vehicle. When you think of Huey, think of craft vehicles. All of these we build as one-offs, and with the idea that someday they can be minimized, someday they can be commercialized, some days they can act not just as a one-off, they can act in a school, or for lack of a better term, a swarm, right? So we're gonna gain about 50 years of scientific improvement and engineering improvement by helping NASA get out to this moon. They're not gonna go for another 50 years or so, but we're gonna have that research and development of technology over that time. For those of you that were paying attention to the news recently, they just sent up the Europa Clipper. So they put up a satellite. It's going to take quite a long time to get there. I think over 6 years of flight time to get out to the moon. But they just sent that out, and we're hoping to get the images back eventually. But I did have a video that I was going to show you. Again, I'll make sure that Amy has the links for you to get, but it's quite impressive what they're trying to do, and it's quite impressive and really cool to see Hui doing it together. For those of you that watch CBS Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley, we were just recently featured in a broadcast about protecting whales from ship strikes. Again, I'll make sure you have the links, but this is a great story about 3 different industries working together to create solutions. So oceanographic research wise, we're in there because we want to start creating buoys and different using different means, including some of the vehicles you see behind you, working together to identify where the whales are, right? And then start putting some of that technology on the ships, but then also getting the ships to voluntarily comply. But then also there's the conservation industry that's also involved. And so it's a really great 8-minute story that shows how the world collides and Hui's role in this and in terms of protecting these endangered species. It's a fantastic piece.
To begin this,
I'm worried that it's going to cut out. So I'm going to kind of shift gears after this next point about joining us to cover some of the books that our folks, given that we're in a library, that some of our folks have written that I think will truly tell the story of Hui. But I do want to ask you to join us. Joining us, when I say together we can, joining us will help us unleash the talent and future generations of talent. It'll help us drive discovery, help us unlock innovation, and help inform action. How do you join us? You can come on behalf as individuals to come and tour Hui. We're currently slow right now. It's a good time to give me a call and we can do a private tour for you. If we want to do it with Amy here as a group and, you know, get a shuttle together, we can do that. That's a nice way to do it, but we can give you the generic and we can give you the behind the scenes, which is very cool. Ask you to become a member. Member will get you access to our information regularly, and or donate and or plan giving are 3 ways or 2 other ways that you can help join us. But just being aware of the immensity of the ocean. We all live here in a coastal community, but there's a lot of folks that haven't even been to the ocean, that don't have access to the water, right? They just don't know the enormity. So even just your awareness and talking with your friends about the importance of the ocean and ocean research is going to help. And now that we're heading into the holiday season, in addition to public engagement, I help run our gift shop. So shameless plug, when you think about holiday and celebration gifts, think about buying from the local nonprofits around here, including Hui, but not just Hui. There are great nonprofits, and that a lot of that money will go back into the research envelope. I think through my endeavor, through the endeavor of our gift shop and our outreach, we were able to put a few $100,000 back into our research envelope to do what isn't funded by the federal government, to start some projects on the side. Also helps keep the heating and the lights on, but you know, it doesn't matter. Find your favorite nonprofit. If they have a gift shop, those are great gifts to give, but it does actually help a lot of those institutions. I'm sorry for the lack of videos, but I will get you those links. I highly recommend watching, especially the one about the whale entanglement, because that'll show you different groups working together. Since we're in a library, figured I'd feature some of the books that are written either by the institution itself or in collaboration with other folks. So for those of you joining online, A children's book, Where the Weird Things Are. So this is a story about the ocean twilight zone. It is a zone in the ocean that is, until recently, largely not known. We spend a lot of our research on the fishing zone where sunlight hits. We spend a lot of time with our robots trying to get to the bottom of the ocean, but there's this huge middle section that turns out has the largest animal migration on planet Earth, and it happens daily. And there's this huge biomass that goes up and down with the sun and the moon, right? And we're now with, as our tags for our charismatic animals like sharks and whales get better, we're able to see where they're going and when, and we're starting to see where they're feeding and where they're mating. And it has a lot to do with this large biomass. Problem is, Norway, Japan, and a few other countries have realized that there is such a biomass that they have floating factories. They can quite literally vacuum them up and create, fertilizer and feed, right? So kind of like the emergency down in the Gulf, we need to get research down there. So through the gentleman who started TED Talks, and a few other folks, they started funding what was called an audacious project. They helped fund this project to truly understand the data and the biomass before it's gone. We want to know what's happening before, the during, and what are the ramifications of this. So really cool children's story about that. Not as in-depth and intense as what I just described, but it's pretty fun. So if you have young ones, cool one to do. Another one, Michael Moore, We Are All Whalers. Michael Moore is a preeminent scientist at the institution. And he is, at a crux between conservation of stopping all things that negatively affect whales, but also the realistic that you can't do it all, but doing the research. He's phenomenal. And he's been doing this for years. 2 careers of mine ago, I helped a research entity called Ocean Alliance studying whales and toxicology. Michael was our guy, and he's just phenomenal. He wrote this book, and it's the plight of whales and our responsibility in that plight. And it's it's a great book. Quick, not necessarily a quick read, but an intense read, and is a really good one for those of you that are interested in whales. And a personal favorite of mine is not written by a author within WHOI, but it's actually written alongside alongside the institution about one of our founding mothers, if you will. So employee number 4 of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution was a woman by the name of Mary Sears. Mary was a deep sea oceanographer studying on bathymetry. At the time that the war effort for World War II was ramping up, the Navy and the Marines were sending people on our Pacific realm or the Pacific Rim into areas where they were just getting decimated by the numbers because they were going on basic oceanography. She was sending maps left and right to the Navy saying, you're not factoring everything in. You need to do this. You're sending these people to their demise. And no one would listen. It was a man's world at the time. She was not allowed on American research vessels. She would go to South America in dangerous situations on research vessels that would allow her to do her research, and she'd come back to the United States to process that research, all at the same time that the war effort was really increasing. In Woods Hole, the Navy, by eminent domain, claimed all of the research, and all the men got to put on their uniforms and went to Washington D.C. and she was left behind, but she never stopped. For those of you that have listened or watched the movie Hidden Figures about NASA and the mathematicians that actually made that happen, this is oceanography's story. This is Mary Sears and Mary Graham, who was our librarian. It's a story about espionage. They were studying in the Library of Congress the different oceanographic elements to make their maps. Ultimately, they proved that they were right. A Navy admiral saw one of these maps when it was too late and said, get Mary Sears here now. She started a whole division, brought her people, including Mary Sears, and the tale is just phenomenal. So I highly recommend it. It's called Lethal Tides. And again, it's Oceanography's version of Hidden Figures, and it's quite entertaining. So I highly recommend it. Again, my apologies for the lack of videos. I wanted to show you those two, especially the space launch and the CBS Sunday morning special, because I think that they're really special, that highlight just a few unique aspects of Hui. But I just wanted to conclude and say thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to come and see me. Some of you again. I'm hoping the folks online, we have some new folks, but happy to take any questions. Some of them I may not be able to answer due to sensitivity of some subjects. And then sometimes I'll, might not have the answer because I'm not the knowledge base expert, but thank you very much for coming today.
Are we doing any studies with regards to the global warming, it's how it's affecting the actual rising of the seas?
Yeah, so the question for those online is who are we doing any research on global warming, the rising of the seas, and just getting a better understanding of that? The answer is yes. In Woods Hole specifically, we actually have a project called Resilient Woods Hole, which it's a self-guided tour now, but we have researchers globally doing research on this. We have researchers studying icebergs and understanding the impacts of a melting iceberg on our rising seas, right? And river estuaries, et cetera, et cetera. But specifically, right here in our own backyards, we have to redo our dock. That's a $100 million endeavor, right? In doing so, we have to decide, are we going to redo our dock at the current height? Do we raise it up 4 feet, 8 feet, 12 feet? Do we build it for 50 years? A typical dock's lifespan is 40 to 50 years. We're at year 60 or 70 now, patching it together. But, what do we do? And so we put together this Resilient Woods Hole scientific group of scientists and policymakers from all around, people talking to us. The gentleman from Boston said, "You think you have a problem? We just put all our roads underground. We have a big water problem there," which they do, right? But at the end of our discussion, the gentleman who directs the U.S. Geological Survey in Woods Hole said, why would you build a 100-year dock for a 50-year town? So if we build it so high, the water's going to run off, but the village of Woods Hole is all going to be washed out anyway. So think about it that way. And and that caused us to truly think about what are the mitigation efforts? Where is it going to be? Is it going to be permanent? Or is it just storm surge where we're going to have it occasionally? We're seeing that storm surge and supermoons well, not the supermoons, but storm surges are happening more and more often because of a changing climate. The weathers are getting worse. So yes, that was a long answer for a very easy answer, which is yes, we are studying that, but it comes in so many different forms right now.
What does plastic pollution in the ocean factor into what you guys do?
Great question for those online. The question is, what is plastic pollution and its role? How are we studying it? What are we doing with that, et cetera, et cetera? The gentleman that I featured earlier, Chris Reddy, who wrote the Scientific Communication Crisis book, he actually, his lab studies ocean plastics, ocean pollution, microplastics, how it breaks down. And he works with different industrial partners that want to actually help improve the making of plastics so that maybe they will break down in different ways than what they're currently doing. Also using algae and other alternatives than petroleum-based, right? So yes, we are doing it. And Chris Reddy, it's his lab, but now it's undertaken by a gentleman by the name of Colin Ward, and a few other folks that are coming up and through the system. And they're just doing phenomenal on that side of the research, but not just doing it from the fundamentals of oceanography, but doing it in partnership with industry, which I think is really important because that's where you're going to get the change. We're all trying the paper straws right now, right? Maybe there's something better, or maybe we just get rid of straws, but these are the types of things that, you know, we're trying to do that will affect everyday life. But again, when I go back to slide 4 of that time scale, this is a decadal survey of really what we're trying to do. It's not an overnight thing. We have competed for projects to help get rid of the big plastic floating dump that's out in the Pacific. There's a couple big foundations that are doing that. There's a lot of creativity there. Our folks are really interested right now in studying what are the types of plastics that are persisting in large form before they get into the micros, but also studying the effects of micros as we start thinking about, you know, bioaccumulation inside of fish, as an example. How is it magnifying through and accumulating all the way up to whales, right? And Chris and his team is actually, they've approached my partner Ann in looking at how far deep into the geological record are we finding these plastics and the breakdown of plastics and its role in the climate. So really interesting stuff. We're doing a lot, but again, we're just scratching the surface now.
You brought up a good point with the microplastics, because I've been out on the beaches for 3 months. It's everywhere.
It
It's
is.
beyond what anybody knows.
It is. It
Any
is.
beach, any high tide, anywhere.
Yep. Yeah, sadly. Yes.
Do you have educational programs for like teenage children, kids who are involved in STEM programs at school? And at the Cape, we have a whole lot of kids who come in the summer, grandchildren come, and all. You have educational programs, are they, would you find them out on
Yeah.
online? Or?
Yeah. So you go to, the question is, do we have educational programming for children of all ages, including high school and middle school? The answer is yes, we have some. We need to improve it, and we are improving that now. Again, our funding goes to research first, education second, outreach third. So we're trying to, you know, bump the second and third place up a little bit in that. The National Science Foundation is actually asking our scientists through something called Broader Impacts to start thinking about education and outreach as part of the scientific endeavor. But to answer your specific question, yes, we do have programming. School groups do come to us. We do go out to school groups. We typically start in a generic form and then bring scientists later on, because we want to keep our scientists studying as much as possible and our engineers building. But we do quite a bit, and you can find that online, and it's whoi.edu, whoi.edu. And actually right up the road here in Mashpee is a phenomenal children's science museum. So if you have little grandchildren and little tykes, and I would say up to, I went a couple of years ago, I went this year to help them open a Alvin thing. Kids of all ages, you know, it's really meant for the little tykes, but man, it is fun. There are brain games in there, brain teasers, and it's a children's science museum there. And they also have some, we've partnered with them to bring the Alvin and a few of our things there, but we are revamping the way we tell our story down in Woods Hole. But yes, we do allow school groups and work with school groups to come in the summertime. Parking is fun there, but we have places to put shuttles and folks that are visiting us. Yeah.
I've seen a few programs on TV where maybe it's due to global warming. The currents in the ocean are totally being redirected either towards the poles, or is that something that happens occasionally on Earth, or is that natural?
The question is about ocean circulation and the currents and the changing currents, and is this a one-time thing or does it happen all the time? I actually don't know the answer to that. I know that there are changing circulation patterns. One of our researchers, Amy Bauer, phenomenal story. Amy is a powerful scientist that got a large grant to study the Gulf of Mexico circulation. Amy herself is a scientist with a visual disability. She does everything verbally. She's just a phenomenal scientist that her disability has not limited her. She's just a wonderful story. But her science is absolutely amazing, and she is studying just that. She is studying the circulation patterns there and any changes therein. But she's not the only one. I just sat in on a talk with one of our main engineers who started studying. We're seeing a lot of a seaweed growth, a certain type of seaweed that's starting to really take over the Atlantic in large clumps, and they're wondering where this is coming from, right? And he's partnering with one of our river estuary scientists. And again, I'm butchering the specifics, but ultimately we're studying ocean circulation and the changing patterns, even from rivers, the output from rivers into the ocean, and what those rivers are carrying. And so the preliminary analysis or hypothesis right now that they're testing is that these large seaweed blooms that are happening are actually a function of what's coming in from the rivers in the forms of fertilizers and other chemicals. But it plays into your larger question about ocean circulation. We're learning more each and every day. We do have scientists studying the fundamentals of that. That's within our, physical oceanography department. Those folks, they have a hard job. They're looking at some of the fundamentals of the physics of the ocean, and that's one of the things that they're studying. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us online. Thank you for joining me today.